Hello, everybody, and welcome to BSing with Sean K. I'm your host, Sean Neese. Joining me today from the United Kingdom is popular YouTuber, stand-up comedian, and host of the Left Wing Propaganda Machine podcast, Richard the Dick Coughlan. Dick, it's great to have you on.
It's very nice to have you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that grandiose intro. It's like putting the word popular in the middle of it. I did a talk at my old college a couple of years ago, and the woman introduced me as Richard Coughlan, a famous comedian, and just like the audience was like, "Oh, I've never heard of this fucker." It's like being famous. Being famous is like saying you're good in bed if you have to keep telling everyone. So, thanks for that.
Well, you have like 18,000 subscribers or so. That's not bad, right?
Well, actually, I don't anymore. I mean, I did have them. I don't at the moment because I lost my channel a couple of months ago for the fourth time with it's nothing with the man trying to keep me down and such and such. No, but I've flitted between. I think my peak was I've peaked at 30,000 before, but I've never managed to get much past that before my channels always get destroyed. So.
Yeah, why is that? Is YouTube doesn't like your content or something?
There's nothing to do. I mean, YouTube don't give a toss about anyone's content. It's the people who watch it, really, don't they? No, I've just had this. I have this habit of annoying the wrong people.
Oh, and they flag your videos.
Yeah, videos get flagged. The point I stopped counting. If you just go with videos that have had fake copyright claims on them, or they've had fake privacy claims, or they've been flagged, it came close to 200 in the last 6 years. That's not including videos that were on my channels when they got taken down. So it's but yeah, I'm on my fourth main channel at the moment in 6 years. And I just, I mean, the thing is, it doesn't really matter what you talk about, really. You're going to get people flag your videos. But if you talk about, I mean, I imagine if you're doing something like Epic Mealtime or that, you're probably not going to get flagged too much because you're not really being that contentious. Well, I imagine some animal rights nutters would probably flag them or something. But yeah, so if you deal with the kind of loonies I deal with on a daily basis, then it's an occupational hazard, I'm afraid.
And so I'll start off asking about your comedy. How did you first develop your passion for comedy, and what were some of your early experiences performing stand-up?
I actually wanted to do stand-up from the age of 9, which is kind of a rare thing. I mean, I'm a bit of a comedy nerd. I mean, everyone sort of when I was growing up as a teenager, everyone was listening to Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and things like that, just grunge music, and then they get listening to Oasis, and I was listening to Eddie Izzard and Lee Evans and watching Billy Connolly and stuff like that. But I mean, I got into it when I was 9 years old. I was going through my dad's vinyl collection when I was 9, and he had a Billy Connolly record, and I couldn't understand a word Billy Connolly said. And of course, the jokes at the age of 9, the jokes are kind of going over your head. But he's got a funny voice and he swears a lot, which is really at the age of 9 all you need. He's just doing. He's just talking about a wee jobby in the toilet, and that's really all you really need. And then I did, but I think when you grow up, everyone wants to be like a rock star, or they want to be a film star or be a footballer and that. But you kind of have this idea that these people fall out of the sky. They're not human. Do you know what I mean? They're like, they're not. They're like that. If you want to be a pop star, you look at David Bowie. You go, David Bowie's he's not normal, is he? He's not from this planet. So I couldn't just go out and be something like that. So I never really considered doing it as such, but then I did act. I actually trained to be a chef, believe it or not. Was what I originally went to college for, and then I did 2 years of acting at college and did really well at that. And then I had the choice when I left of shall I go to drama school or can I do something else? And I just didn't feel like going to drama school. So I just looked into how you go about doing stand-up, which is getting a copy of the local listings and just finding the new act comedy nights, of which there are thousands of them, and you just phone people up, and it's a case of just ringing around, getting yourself booked in. I did my first gig. It was November 28th, 2001, many years ago, and it was in a pub called the Coach and Horses in London, the smallest comedy club in the country at the time. I think there were about 20 people in the room, and that's including probably the acts on the stage as well. And I went on sixth, and it went really well. And just from that, you just go from there on. Really, you just kept doing it. I did my first comedy. I did my first Edinburgh Festival in 2006. How many have I done of them now? I think I've done 5 Edinburgh Festivals now. I've done like 3 Brighton Festivals. I've done a Camden Festival, Glasgow. You just sort of go around and you just sort of keep plodding along, really. But that's really where it came from. It was just something I was always interested in. I've always been fascinated by, and I would say, as well, maybe I'm a bit biased. I'm sure if you talk to anyone who does anything, they'll probably have their own view on this. But I mean, I've always felt that comedy it's the last sort of true. It's the rawest and most honest form of expression, because once you've got a guy. Once you book a comedian, you've got a guy on stage. He literally can say anything he wants at that point, and there's a certain dangerous element to that. I mean, you go see a band, you know they're going to play certain songs. You don't expect too much else other than that. Or you go see a play, or you go see a film or whatever. But you go see a guy. Once a guy is standing on stage, he's going to have his routine. But if he felt like it, he could go off and say anything. And there's that kind of that's always sort of that's one of the sort of edgier elements to stand up, and so I've just always felt that I've always felt that about it, that it's got this, and there's a simplicity to it as well. I've always been a bit of a minimalist. I've always been drawn to things that make the most out of the least, and there's nothing more minimal than just a bloke on stage with a microphone, just talking, or just someone on stage with a microphone. It just sort of there's a simplicity, a simple beauty to it.
And what can you say about your experiences with hecklers? Have you grown thicker skin over the years? Or?
Hecklers, I actually have a routine about this. Hecklers. Hecklers are an occupational hazard, but they're not something that happens very often. They're not something you prepare for, really. Some people are better at dealing with them than others. I've tended not to have too much of a problem with them, mainly due to the fact that I think it depends on your act. I mean, I come across as quite aggressive, or quite sort of, I'm quite energetic and angry, or sort of on stage, and as a result, people don't tend to want to heckle me, because they think I'm just going to jump off the stage and eat their head or something. So it tends not to be a problem for me. But there's this one example I bring up. I'll actually tell you. So my favourite one that happened in Northern Ireland. I was doing a gig in Northern Ireland, and a guy, as I walked on stage, I haven't even started talking, and a guy in the front said, like, "Excuse me," he's like, "Are you gay?" Like, just asking me this, just as I walked on stage, asking me if I was gay, and this, if the audience don't know what I look like, this won't work. But you just got to imagine, I'm just this. I'm very, very thin. Got this. I've got very pale skin, bags under my eyes. So I've got this. And I said to him, "Why do you think I'm gay?" And he says, "Because you look like you've got AIDS." Right? And that's what and this is what happened. And this is like live. Everyone sort of like goes really tense and that. And I was there for about 20 seconds trying to figure out how to respond to this. And I looked down at the guy, and he was laughing. So I just spat at him. And he just got out and my response was then, "I don't know if I've got AIDS, sir, but in 6 months you will. Can you send me an email?" And that was sort of like, that was it. But other than that, I mean, hecklers are they're not something that's encouraged in comedy clubs. I mean, a lot of comedy clubs will kick you out if you're heckling too much or if you're being too disruptive. Because, unfortunately the problem is a lot of people, they get this idea that, if you're heckling's part of it. And yeah, we're just trying to add to the show. And it's like, you're not really. Just, if you want to add to the show, then go write an act, and book yourself in. But my experience with hecklers is it's one of those ones I've tended to avoid it a lot. But there's some people who I think have more problems with it than others. But
and I think I saw you use that in your routine once.
Yes. There is another story as well about a blind guy who heckled me in Clapham. He was at the front, and my response to him was, if you're blind, why are you sitting at the front of the fucking audience for, you selfish bastard? Because there's nothing, you're not getting anything out of that. So, those are the only two real sort of significant ones. The rest of them are just people who and it's one of those things. It's like you either over the course of time you develop. Because the thing about hecklers is they're by the very nature of being a heckler, they're not the most imaginative people. They're not sort of like, they're not the people who you got to worry about it. They're very limited in what they can say back to you, and you just got to realise that all I've got to do is you got to top them, quickly, and so you got to be able to say anything to sort of put them in their place, and then once they realise that, they'll either carry on, in which case they'll get chucked out, or they just shut up out of embarrassment.
And what were some of your favourite gigs you performed, and why?
Oh, favourite gig. Again, I love the Edinburgh Festival. I do love doing the Edinburgh Festival. I'm not doing it this year. I've done it for the last 2 years now. I've done it 5 times in total, and it's just if you've never been to the Edinburgh Festival, anyone's never been to the Edinburgh Festival, to me it's like it's just, you've got to go. It's just such a, you go there, there's like 1,800 shows on, ranging from people in the street juggling knives. There's street theatre. There's people doing dance. There's art galleries. There's a film festival that's going on. There's an Islam festival that happens at the same time, because there's a big mosque in Edinburgh. So there's the Islam festival that happens at the same time. There's a book festival. There's art gallery art festivals going on, and then you've got the comedy festival at the same time. And they just and it's just, I would just recommend that going to that and just doing an hour every day for 3 weeks on the trot. It's a very draining experience, but that's always been my favourite place to go. Brighton as well as a great thing. But it's amazing how it sounds really, really sad when you sit and go how tiring it is doing an hour a day. But it does really take it out of you. Yeah, so I'd say probably the Edinburgh Festival is my favourite place. As far as gigs in UK venues that I always enjoyed, Comedy Store is always a good one. It's just a great venue. But other than that, I would say definitely the festivals are the more fun. I remember, I think the most I ever did, I think it was the second year I did Edinburgh. I did 82 gigs in 3 weeks, and just shattered by the end of it. I did 5 in a day once, and my last gig was at 3 in the morning in a place called the Comedy Theatre, in a place called the Theatre Royale in Edinburgh. I just this piss stained smelling room. And there was about 17 people there, but it's like, what are you going to do at 3 a.m? I don't even remember what I did. I was that bewildered by that point.
And so, were there any comedians you enjoyed sharing the stage with in particular?
As far as comedians, I've met a lot of. The thing about when you do a gig with another comedian, it doesn't really affect you. Whether you're doing a gig on your own or doing a gig with another comedian, it doesn't really affect you as much, because you're either going to do well or you're not. And so there's lots of comedians out there who I enjoy, but as far as whether I'm on stage with them or not, it really makes no difference whatsoever whether you're on stage with them or not. Because you're either going to, I said, the audience are either going to like you or not. They're not going to like you more because, because Stuart Lee's on before you or Stuart Lee's on after. They're not going to find you any better just because of that. They're either going to. A lot of people don't like gigging with popular comedians because they feel that there's more pressure on them. But I mean, my attitude was always at the end of the day, it's like I want to be at that level. You know what I mean? I want to be if I want to be at the top level, then I've got to be competing, or if I feel like it, I've got to feel like I can just slip in between, Reg Hunter and Dara O'Brien. I can just slip in between those guys, and no one's gonna, and it's not gonna make any difference. So for me, that was always more fun. But yeah.
And how does the United Kingdom, the scene in the United Kingdom, how does it differ from like other places?
Well, interestingly, I mean, America, I always feel was like America's always been, decades ahead. I mean, America was like the most innovative country in terms of stand-up. I mean, for you, I mean, in the 50s and the 60s, you had George Carlin and Lenny Bruce, who were, just miles ahead. I mean, in this country, we had to wait until like the 1980s before we got any decent stand-up, because before that, it was just a load of shitty jokes told by blokes in frilly shirts with velvet jackets, doing jokes about, my mother-in-law, and is it this Irishman? There's an Irishman, a Jew, and a Pakistani, and an Indian bloke, and a black guy, and it's just all these terrible. It was all these terrible stereotypes that were all the same. Like the Irishman was always stupid, the Indian bloke always had a corner shop, the Chinese bloke had a laundrette, the French guy was smelly, the German guy was a Nazi, the Italian guy it was just always just dreadful. And then, but I think in terms of stand-up now, I actually think, I mean, a lot of American comedians come over to Britain, and they actually prefer it because it's just such a smaller, because the country's so small, it's like you don't have to, there's no travel involved as such. I mean, Bill Hicks always said that he preferred gigging in Britain. And a lot of comedians there's a lot of Canadian comics, a lot of American comics I know, who just come over to Britain, and it's a lot easier. And plus, there's always that added appeal of being a foreigner in another country, doing material, because like you can do jokes about them from a perspective that you couldn't do if you were from that country. So I think definitely now. I mean, I definitely think it's. If I was in America, I don't know how I would, how I could even begin to do stand up, because you just got each state's got its own scene and its own little circuit that you've got to travel around to go and do, and so getting seen or picked up is just going to be a nightmare, I imagine. And the new acts, I was talking to one guy and he was telling me about the new act nights in California or Los Angeles, and he said, like, you turn up and there's like 25 acts and you get like 3 minutes and stuff, and they just keep churning them out and stuff, and so it just sounded like a nightmare to me. But yeah, I definitely prefer in terms of the stand up, I definitely prefer the British stand up scene to anywhere else. But I do think America was a much more, was decades ahead of everyone in terms of innovative and original stand-up.
Yeah, well, and a lot of the good stand-ups still around have been around a while, from America, like Doug Stanhope or Louis C.K., they've been around a while.
Well, I mean, Doug Stanhope's one of those cases where Doug Stanhope's never going to be, I mean, he's too raw to be, ever to be that famous, but I mean, he's been going, I mean, he's like, I think he was going 20 years when I heard of him, and that was about, he's probably been going 25 years now. I mean, it just gives you an idea of a lot of the, of how long it takes, if your goal is to get recognised or to get on TV or to get famous or have a DVD or have whatever out, you're going to be doing it a hell of a long time. And a lot of guys who are famous over here, I'd heard of, they've been going, I'd only just started hearing about them. It's like, they've been going 16, 16, 17 years. So you have to be prepared to put. Sometimes it depends if you get things over. Some people get picked up a lot sooner, but depending on your act, you can be waiting. It can be a long time before anyone's even recognised you.
And what would you say about your style comedy, and how has it changed or progressed since the time you started till now?
That's always something I never know how to answer that when people talk about my style of comedy, because I always feel that's for other people to. I mean, I think when I started, I fell into that trap of. You see this with a lot of young comics. It tends to be a young person's a thing that happens to you when you're young. It's like, oh, you've got to go out there, you've got to be as offensive and as edgy. You've got to say anything you can, and you soon realise that's a bit of it's a bit of a waste of time. That I mean, because we live in an era now where this idea of like the comedian who says things that are unsayable. It's gone. I mean, there's no longer anything that's unsayable anymore, and there's no longer anything that hasn't already been said. I mean, there was a time, when doing jokes about abortion or jokes about maybe paedophilia, or maybe jokes about cancer, or jokes about anything, or jokes about third world hunger, or jokes about domestic violence, or anything like that. Doing jokes about anything like that, they would have been. They would have been edgy, it would have been edgy to do them just in and of themselves. But in this day and age, it really isn't. And you also learn that being offensive is not something that's, being offensive is not something you should deliberately set out to do. You either are, because George Carlin or Bill Hicks or Richard Pryor, they never set out to be offensive. They just did what they thought was funny, and that happens to be a style that is considered. But I mean, I've always said there's no such thing as an offensive joke, because if you find it funny and you recognise it's a joke, then it's not offensive. But if you're offended by something, then it's clean. There are a lot of people who use comedy as a way of just being offensive.
Daniel Tosh. I don't get why. I mean,
I've heard of Daniel Tosh. Yeah, I've heard of him. But you get this a lot with people. You get a lot of people who are like, they'll come out and they'll be on TV and they'll have their little outlet, and they'll say things that are really, really dodgy. And then when you sort of bring them up or they get in trouble, they'll say, "Oh, it's just a joke," and it's like, and that's it. And it's like that's their get out of. It happens on YouTube. Quite a lot is one thing. I have this massive chip on my shoulder about this phrase YouTube comedian. Is a phrase that it really winds me up, because it's just a lot of people just they come out and then they get in trouble for something. It's like, oh, it was a joke. I was just it was satire. I'm like, well, of what? I mean, it's like, but my style is. I think if anything, my style it's. I've always been I've never been one to write. I mean, there's people like Jerry Seinfeld's a good example of a guy who is just the most disciplined performer. When you go watch him, I've seen, you can watch Jerry Seinfeld 3 nights on the trot, and it's the same routine every night, and everything's the same. Everything from the pauses in between the gags to like the movement, like if he puts his hand in his jacket or where he takes out, and it's exactly the same. And I've never been like that. I've always kind of just had. I like to keep things a little bit loose, but definitely now I think I'm a lot more sort of. I think a lot more about what I am when I write a joke now. I won't just write a joke and do it, and if it gets me, I've got to be able to justify a joke to myself, and there's 2 ways to justify it. There's a moral justification and there's an artistic justification. It's very easy. Like when a celebrity dies, there's always these people that will trot out the jokes quickly. You get it all the time. Like people will send you jokes on a text message and stuff like that. And to me, it's like, right, is there? I could do a joke about, let's say, Amy Winehouse dies or something like that. It's like I could do a joke about that, but is there any reason for me to make fun of Amy Winehouse dying? Did she ever really do anything that warranted mockery? And the answer is probably no. And it's certainly not to me. And then artistically, it's like, even if I do come up with a good joke, is there any point to it? Is it just me making fun of someone who's dead? And so nowadays there's a lot more thought into it. I think if anything, it's like whereas political correctness has always been something that's been derided in comedy and that, like, because people say a joke and like it's, you know, whether it uses language or it's a little bit near the mark. I think nowadays it's actually something that a lot of people use quite cleverly. So you can tell a joke that it sounds on the surface to be quite, you know, obscene or offensive, but actually it's where I suppose where does your comedy come from? And you know, and mine always comes from, it doesn't come from a place of hatred, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I sort of look at it. It comes from a place of, you know, a lot of my stuff's about, you know, is about racial, you know, about racism and about sexism, homophobia, you know, prejudice in general, sort of, you know, extremisms in politics, you know, and stuff like that. Because I spend most of my time dealing with like far right political groups, you know, or racist groups, or this, that, and the other. And so when you're dealing with that, you've got to sort of, you know, and a lot of people will do comedy, and they'll do it from that place where they hate, like they'll make fun of minorities or gays or women because they've got that innate bigotry in them, and there comes that sort of comes across. And for me, it's like that's when comedy sort of loses a bit of its appeal to me, when I feel that it's coming from a place of hatred.
And what's overall the most difficult part of performing stand-up?
To be honest, there's none. I mean, not anymore. I mean, once you've got, it's one of those things. I mean, it's like, I mean, I do still get the butterflies, and I get nervous before a gig. But that's more excitement about wanting to get on stage and do it, because you don't get to do it that much. I mean, it's not like your average job where you go and you do it 8 hours a day or 45 hours a week, and then you go home. So when you get a chance to do it, it's exciting. But I suppose the only hard part, the only time when it's quite difficult, is if you're trying out new material, because that's when, you know, you've got to sort of take the risk of like, this is going to be crap, because no matter how long you've been writing, you know, I could sit here and write. I mean, it happens. Every comedian will tell you there's that one joke they've got where they've sat down and they've written it and they thought, that's it. That is the joke. This is it from now on. This is my legacy. This is how, you know, this will go down in history as the greatest joke ever written by anyone. And then you go and perform it, and it's like nothing, not a sodding laugh from it. No one gives a toss, you know, and it's like just crickets throughout the room. And you try it now, no matter how many times you try it, you're like, why is this not funny? Why am I the? And then you get these jokes you write that you're like, that's all right, that's a throwaway line, and it just, everyone's like, oh, it's brilliant, it's laughing. So you can never really tell. You can never really tell with new material, but like new material is just that's the only time when it's difficult. But that's just, you know, it's only difficult because you just, you know, you've got to. It takes time to develop new material, and you've got, unfortunately, stand-up's one of those. Stand-up is a bit like having sex. You can't get good at it before you've tried it. You know? It's like you have to. In order to get good at it, you have to do it a lot of times before, and you know. And then eventually, after a while, you'll get your technique down, and you'll be in front of the right person, and then it'll all happen, you know.
And so, what's the latest news with your comedy? What do you have planned next?
Well, the last time I was I've spent the last few years doing a show called Eat a Queer Fetus for Jesus. As you can tell, like I said, I've refined my stuff a lot more. But yeah, I spent a few years doing that. That was a show that took a long time to get right. I actually began writing that. It's based primarily on one half-hour routine, which is a true story of my girlfriend having an abortion in 2006, and it took a while to be able to get a show to build around that, and so it took about 5-6 years, and then I basically performed that for the last couple of years. I've performed that all over the place. I've done it in London. I've done it up in Edinburgh, Brighton. Did it in Camden Festival, a couple of other places, and so. But now sort of moving on to, I'm currently working on the show. I'm trying to write a new show as it is now, and I originally had two titles for it. The first one was called Anti-White Politically Correct Manginas Activate, which was the first one. And then I had an idea for a second one. It was The Thoughts of Chairman Lamau.
Oh, yeah.
And the problem was, it was like, I didn't know which one to go for, so I posted it on Facebook saying which one should I go for, and the overall world was like, I should use both. So now, so now my next show will be called Anti-White PC Manginas Activate: The Thoughts of Chairman Lamau, which will hopefully get. I mean, I've always gone for the eye-catching title, because that generally. Eat a queer fetus for Jesus. I never had to advertise that show, because people would see it and they'd be like, right, I've got to see that show. And that's sort of, I've always gone for the idea, like, if I've got a title, like, I want to pick a title where if I read it, I'd be like, I want to see that show, just on the title alone. So I figured that would be a good enough one. But I mean, it's always going to be along the same lines. There's no sort of, I never write with an idea of like thinking, right, I want to write a show about this. I want to write a show with this theme. I literally just write until I've got enough material, and then comes the case of putting it together and constructing it and putting it into a set. And so that's what I'm sort of working on at the moment.
So what can you tell us about your videos and what motivated you to start making them?
My first, when I started making them, primarily the reason I started making them was literally just because I was bored. And I had nothing. It was 2008, 4th of July 2008, easy date to remember. But I'd done Edinburgh Festival the previous couple of years, and it was like July, and I wasn't doing the Edinburgh Festival in 2008. So I thought, I want to do something that, what's going to fill the time in it, sort of keep me from getting bored or distracted. And I'd been on YouTube as a spectator for a couple of years, and I'd seen people. I'd run into certain other people and seen other people who were making these videos that were just sort of like people responding to someone else or about this, that, and the other. And I thought, I could do this. This would be something to give it a go. And so I did, and I just sort of went on there. I mean, I never came on there I never really had an agenda that went beyond the sort of, just the acquisition of nutters. I mean, that was really it. I realised, I mean, I like I sort of like nutters, and particularly nutters that are new, not obvious nutters, not nutters who are like, who you feel sorry for. I mean, not those, but people who are like, people who, have these insane and absolute, and to this day, I every week, I will see something, I'll see a video, or I'll read a comment, or I'll get a message, and I'll go, that is the stupidest, that is the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life, and nothing's ever going to top that. And then by the following week, I'm like, no, this is the most insane, stupidest thing. And and I came on there, I'd never done video before. I'd never done anything on video. And so I figured it would just be a good outlet, good way. And also the other thing about YouTube is there's no pressure. There's no pressure on you, because you're not working for anyone. You don't have to produce a certain and also it's one of those cases where the audience find you, and you just put it out there, and if people like it, they stay, and if they don't, they don't. And whereas with stand-up, you go to a venue, and whoever's there, that's who you've got. It's 1,000 times easier than doing stand-up, though. But I mean, really, as it developed, my sort of just idea became, the idea became like, I'm just going to do whatever videos, whatever I feel like making, I'll make. But I just wanted it to, I didn't want to become, as it goes on, there's a problem on YouTube with a lot of people who make videos, and after a while they become very, it's like a Scooby-Doo cartoon where they're running in the background, and it's the door, window, cactus, plant, door, window. It's just the same thing over and over again. And I never wanted to do that. I always wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing was different. And so, you didn't know what sort of video I was going to upload next. And, and you ask most people what their favourite sort of type of video I've done is. There's none of them that are really the same. My videos can be serious. They could be, quite, they can be quite cathartic. They could be, ridiculous. They could be it could be a parody. It could be a comedy sketch. It could be, it could just be something random that I found. It could just be responding. It could be a report, a sort of report on something. There's no real one issue or subject that I sort of stick to, and I kind of like it that way, because I don't like falling into this habit of getting, because there was this problem where when I started I was doing lots of videos about responding to religious people, and I fell into this trap of being part of the online atheist community. And then which was fine for a while, but then after a few years, I realised that the online atheist community were just as fucking annoying as everyone else. So, you ended up. Of course, I think that's one thing I've learnt now. When people say the main difference I've learnt between atheists and religious people is, with religious people, you can find out what religion they are, and you can pretty much figure out what little bits and pieces of crazy silliness they're going to have within them. If they say, you can figure out what, roughly, what whereabouts they're going to be. Whereas with atheists, each one's got their own little personal, individual set of insane, crazy, stupid beliefs that you then have to find out one at a time. And I say this as an atheist, obviously, who accepts that probably most of the stuff I believe is raging horseshit. So, before unless anyone gets offended by that.
So what led you to becoming an atheist?
Nothing led me to it. I've always sort of been one. I mean, it's really one of these. This was another thing that I kind of lost. I never really got I suppose if I had been someone who had grown up in a sort of very religious environment, family, whatever, and it had been it had been a very orthodox, strict religious environment, and there was this, and that I became cast away or something, or was mistreated because I didn't believe in God. But I can understand why a lot of people have this aggressive attitude. They come out of it and they have this very anti-theistic, militant angriness to them. And I just never had that, because, I grew up in Britain, where religion is, it's just no one gives a toss over here. We invented the Church of England over here, which is as close to atheism as you get, while still technically believing in God. Although, to be honest, that isn't even a massive requirement from the church that you even do that. So, a religion was just never anything that was a massive part of my life. I found it fascinating. I'd always been interested in it. I'd been interested in it since I was a kid. And I think I remember having my first discussions about it when I was 14 or something like that. And so it was always something I found interesting. But in America, when I talk to a lot of Americans who I know, they have their attitude towards, they're always shocked to find out that there's no creationists over here. In America, in the 20 years since in my entire life, I've met 3 creationists, and 2 of them were these 2 sisters who had just moved in from South Africa so even they weren't from this country. And the other one was this one guy who worked at Southampton University, and that's really all I've ever met in the way of creationists. Whereas in America, they're just all over the bloody place. And so yeah, nothing led me to it. I don't think anything leads anyone. I've always been of the opinion that you spend most of your life, your early life, up until the age of almost 18, nothing. All your decisions are made for you. Everything's chosen for you. Where you go, what you see, what you do, what you eat, where you learn, what you learn. All of this stuff, bits and pieces, and all these decisions are made for you by other people. You just happen to be there, and by that point, you're pretty much formed as a human being in terms of your attitude and your mentality. And so I think the reason most people are atheists is the same reason most people are not, or theists, because that's the way their life happens to have gone. I didn't grow up in a religious family. I didn't have any idea of religion pushed upon me, but I didn't have it pushed away either. I could have, if I'd have been religious, that would have been fine. That would have been there would have been an issue with that, but that's just it. So I never had that passion for it that so many people seem to to have, because I just felt that it wasn't something that I came about with through some. I didn't have some, for want of a better word, religious experience that led me to not believing in God. I just happened not to.
So do you have mostly atheists in your circle, or do you get along, with non-atheists? Do you get along well with like non-atheists or some religious people as well?
Oh, I get on very well with a lot of them. I mean, to me, it's like I learned one thing. One thing I've come to learn is that a person's politics matters a lot more than what their beliefs are. Because I mean, I've never met two religious people who have the same beliefs. I've never met two Christians who are the same. I've never met two Muslims. I think, there are as many denominations of Christianity as there are people who claim to be Christian, because each one of them will have bits that they ignore, bits that they. And I've always looked at it this way: let's say you've got four people, and you've got two atheists and two Christians in a room, but one of the Christians is very conservative, one of the Christians is very liberal, and one of the atheists is very conservative, and one of the atheists is very liberal. I guarantee you that the two liberals will be more likely to get on with each other than they will the two Christians, and then the two conservatives will get on well with each other more than likely just the two. That will be the thing that generally tends to get them, tends to unite people. And when you look at the world, that tends to be the thing that does unite people. Is a lot more is their individual. I mean, most of the people who are involved in like secular movements and stuff like that, they tend to be people who are religious. If you go and look at, you go look at any area of politics, if there's going to be a mix of people, you'll find loads of, you look at we've got this stuff in the news recently about Israel and Palestine, and it always gets drawn down to mean Jews and Muslims, but that's absolute nonsense, because there's loads of Jewish organisations who are, Jews in support of Palestine, or Jews against the Israeli government, or whatever, or Jews against and you'll get people. There's Muslims for Israel is an organisation that exists, and so
or Christian Palestinians,
exactly, or Turkey's voting for Christmas, I think would be a better one for that. But I mean, so I find that people I know lots of. I don't know lots of religious people. I don't tend to, but I tend not to bring it up, really. I mean, I tend not to. It's not something I'll make a big deal out of or ask about. I mean, my sister is married to a guy whose parents are very sort of like Irish Protestant and very sort of strict and that. And when it was went to my sister's wedding, my mum told me I was banned from talking to them, other than anything from a yes or a no. Do not talk to them. Just walk away. And they know that I do stand-up comedy, but they don't know any more than that, because obviously I'm doing a show called Eat a Queer Fetus for Jesus. There's not really a lot you want to sort of go into about that. But yeah, I mean, no. Interestingly, with stand-up over the last sort of 10 years, since obviously 9/11. There's been a big influx of Muslim stand-up, of a lot more Muslims doing stand-up. At the time, there was only really one or two who were doing it, but now there's a lot more, and there's always been a bigger Jewish element in stand-up. But I mean, a lot of them aren't religious in any way. But yeah, and there's only a couple of I do know a couple of there's been a couple of Christian comedians, only a few, but yeah, so. But yeah, I've never had a problem. I'll get on well with anyone. I just tend not to. I tend to think that if someone tells me they believe in God, my thing is like, okay, and what else? That's not enough for me, because there's nothing I can infer beyond that. I don't know. They might be a very nice. They might be all for equality and and people with equal rights and all this other stuff. They might be they might just be a massive pain in the arse. And so you're going to have to get to know people a lot better before you can make any judgment, I feel.
And what's your opinion about more a certain spirituality that's not necessarily like dogmatic, but like meditation, or just reaching like a state of mind that's more
that's all well and good. I mean, I'm of the opinion that if it gets you through your day, then fair play to you. I mean, I'm not gonna. I mean, I'm speaking as a guy who who spent 12 years with severe substance abuse problems, and at the end of the day, it's like, and I've cleared up now, and I've been clean for a while, but you sort of realize, I sort of realize after a while, it's like, what is the fundamental difference between someone who takes drugs and someone who believes in God? There is, I mean, in terms of like what you do, I mean, a drug, people that say belief in God or belief in the supernatural is a delusion. But if anything, taking drugs is a chemical delusion. It's you putting yourself, because you're changing your state of mind, you're altering your emotional and your physical and your mental state. You're creating this distorted perception of the world around you that might make you feel better, and it might make you get you through, get you through life a lot better. But it's just it's still not real. But at the same time, you're not going to get someone who's choking on his own vomit because he's had too much faith injected into his. He's had too much Jesus. You're not going to get some guy going out and robbing old people's homes and stealing from people because they need to get some Jesus in them. I don't know. So I think we're all sort of that. We all sort of have that in us. Just some of us deal with it. I suppose in a way, if I look back on it, I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm not saying forgiving people's having, because people do have rather whacked out crazy beliefs that can be dangerous. But I think that's within all of us. I think the danger is, people think, this happens a lot with atheists too, they seem to think because they don't believe in God that they are purely rational beings that cannot be are unsusceptible to non. And the fact is, I don't think that's the case at all. I think we all are. I mean, psychologists will tell you that all human beings are delusional to an extent. We always seem to think we've got, the way with the opinions and the ideas we've figured it all out. We've got it, because we wouldn't have the opinions and the ideas we do. But as far as people who just believe in that old airy fairy spirituality, the stuff that's quite vague. I mean, yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, if it's like, if it gets them
about reaching a certain state of mind rather than actually like a force, like a state of mind that's like irrelevant to whether there's like some kind of actual like force or being.
I mean, the thing is that's kind of, it goes back to a lot of people will do that. A lot of people do that with drugs though. A lot of people take mushrooms, don't they? And they go, oh yeah, man, I'm on another level. I mean, I'm seeing the things, I'm seeing the world. I was like, no, you're seeing shit that isn't there. I'm like, yeah, but it is there, but we just can't see it because it's not really there. It's like, that's the sort of, the thing is meditation. I mean, meditation and all these other things, they do tend to, they do tend to put us in certain, I mean, people do have, states of euphoria that are brought out by religious experience, and they're not, it doesn't mean that the religious experience is real, is caused by any, it just means that your mind is, that's how powerful your mind is. Your mind will tell you, if your mind tells you what you're feeling, then you'll feel that, you see that with like mass hysteria. If you ever see like situations of mass hysteria where people are told, like, there's an infectious outbreak and you're going to get these symptoms and these symptoms, then people start exhibiting those symptoms and they haven't got anything. It's just their mind is telling them that. So it's kind of, I said that stuff doesn't bother. I'm of the opinion, like, if it doesn't bother me, then it should be like anything. If it doesn't bother me, then I'm not gonna worry about it, and I don't see a lot of, I mean, some bloke putting some sandals on and sitting in his back garden in a yogurt position, Indian, like sitting down cross-legged Indian style. I don't see him, he's not going to be much of a problem. So if it's getting him through the day, then leave him alone, stop bothering him. Yeah. He's not hurting anyone.
Well, it's just because, like, I've met people who are atheists that, like, kind of, they don't believe in a god or anything like that, but they kind of find, like, they kind of enjoy, like, meditation or just being more present and that kind of thing, because it's kind of like, I guess it's like a way of just kind of like appreciating the world around you, irrelevant to whether there's a god or not.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's like everyone's going to have to find something that gets. I mean, I don't care what this idea about I mean, the truth is reality. If you start really looking at reality, and the world around us, it's actually very depressing, and it's not the easy. The idea that problem with human beings is we're too intelligent for our own good, and we have to create this idea that there's a reason for us here, because otherwise, if there is no, a lot of people create this idea because, whilst it doesn't bother me personally, I can see why it would be a bit of a bummer if you came to the conclusion that, right, so we're just sort of here. We weren't put here for any reason. We don't go anywhere afterwards, and we just breed and we die, right? Okay, and that's it. Now that I can see why a lot of people would find that a bit of a buzzkill. Me, I don't. I mean, my attitude, I don't sort of have this idea. These people sort of say, oh, there's no meaning to life. I'm like, that's kind of a good thing to me because it means I can sort of do whatever I feel like without having to worry. Not in the extreme. Not so.
You can make your own.
You can make your own meaning.
Yeah, it depends on your attitude. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't sort of go for the idea that my life has meaning because I've given it one. I mean, I just sort of go for the idea that there's no judgment. It's like if I can't.
Yeah.
No matter how many times anyone tells me this is. If there's no real way, if there's no real objective definition of right or wrong, then it's your way to figure it out. You get this with a lot of things with things like drugs and abortion is another issue, where there's this, with the religious people and with a lot of, and there are atheist pro-life groups and stuff like that. There's this objective right and wrong, and it's like no, there's not. And the thing is that. If it's an objective right and wrong in your mind, but I mean in my mind there's a grey area to there, and it's like each case has to be taken in its own sort of individuality. I mean it's quite nihilistic in a way, I suppose, my outlook, but I'm not sort of like, I never understood nihilists who bang on about it because you just bang on about nihilism because you think, well, ultimately it doesn't matter anyway. So why would you, if you believe that it's all meaningless, why are you just going on about it? But yeah, so my outlook's one, like, I suppose I'm a bit more cynical than I used to be about my outlook of the world. But I sort of have this vague, I suppose if I've got one delusion, it's that I'm deluded by the sense that I believe human beings can learn to do the right thing.
And human beings really can't learn to do the right thing unless they look at what's wrong in the world, unless they, look at the world as it is.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the problem. Again, that's the problem with life. Is it, like I was saying with stand-up earlier, when I was talking about stand-up and having sex, is like being alive is something we learn to do whilst we're doing it. We don't get a sort of we're not given a rundown sheet or a script or anything beforehand. We've got no idea, and then we don't get to come back and go back and do it all over again. So this is why it takes so long for us to sort of progress and do things, to get to that, because we have to sort of, every time you have a new generation, they've got to start all over again. And you've got to, and so it takes, this is why it takes time, a long time for things to evolve, for society to evolve into things like, I mean, you can see it happening. I mean, you can see it now in America, like with the, gay people in America now are sort of being more, much more accepted and much more sort of, they're getting a lot more gay marriage, gay rights and stuff like that is happening a lot quicker, and you see this happening a lot, and you certainly see this with the extreme right, far right seem to be, they're getting louder, but that's only because they're running out of steam, and so the few of them that are left seem to be getting louder and louder. So it can appear that there's a lot more of them out there, but there's actually not. And that's that's us progressing down that sort of road. I mean, once you get to the, and I'm sort of accepting of that. I mean, I'm at an age now where there's certain words now that I can't say anymore that I used to be able to say when I was a kid, but I can't say anymore. And I was like, I could turn into one of those miserable old farts who just whinges about everything, who sits and goes, oh, you can't, oh, when I was a kid we could say spastic and nignog and wog and all this other stuff and nobody cared. Or I could just go along with it and go, and just progress and evolve, and that's sort of, change is inevitable, and young people are better than you, so you have to sort of that's one of the things you have to learn that. So just carry on, Yeah.
So out of all the extremist groups you've dealt with, who have been the most frustrating and why?
Well, I mean, I suppose we're frustrating in terms of just being unable to talk to them. There's a group. who don't really have a name. I mean, they're another brand of white supremacist. But the name I came up to them was the white genotards. And the reason I call them that is their whole thing is that there's a white genocide happening. There's a genocide of white people.
Anti-racist, anti-white.
And their mantra is anti-racist is code for anti-white, and they've got a whole mantra. And I've just never encountered a group of people who won't let you engage with them on any level. Like, all they do is and I went on one of their websites, and looked at their forum, and they've got this thing. It's like, and there's a picture on their forum saying, "Where did you copy and paste the mantra today?" And this is all they do. They copy and paste this mantra out, which is anti-racist code for anti-white, and there's a whole thing, and they just copy and paste it on as many websites and blogs and forums all day, and then report back. And it's just like the most random stuff. It's like, I went on the Crufts dog show forum, or we went on this horticultural website, and we went on this other stuff, and they're just like, and that's all they put. And you just sit there just frustrated, saying, look, none of first of all, your entire mantra makes no sense logically. Even you break it down, it's complete nonsense. But other than that, even if it did, you're never going to convince people by just copy and pasting anything down. And just like, no matter how many times I've tried to just, talk to them, they just won't. But one thing was, on one of their websites, they had this thing for, for the anti-white person of the year. And I was nominated, and I didn't win. I was so fucking pissed off. I considered getting people to sort of flood the website and vote for me. But yeah, no, it's just these people they're locked off in their own little zone, and they're just, they think this is what they're gonna have to do. They think if they just copy and paste this over and over again, so they're easily the most frustrating to deal with. But even people like the BNP, members of the English Defence League, or other political extremes, I've been able to engage them in some way. I've been able to, reach them in some way, and and I've even had messages from them saying that I've deconverted them, so I know that I can reach them. But like these other people, the white genotards, I've just never been able to their brains are impenetrable to absolutely anything.
And then your comedy name was that show you're doing. That was a combination of like the different things they've called you, right? Like, or they throw around like the MRAs say mangina.
Yeah, the mangina. I mean, the MRAs tend to have they've got generally, it's a combination of pussy chasing, white knighting mangina is the full one, which I just never understand. No, I mean, I've literally had a guy at an MRA sort of say to me, he's like, you only defend or support feminism because you're trying to get laid, and I'm like, let's say that that's true. When did this become a bad thing? Did I miss a meeting? Was there a big man meeting where suddenly it was like, going out and trying to get laid was all of a sudden this was an issue. I must have missed that memo. And but yeah, but I mean, even if that was the case, and even if it was true, I'd certainly prefer that to being one of them. So I mean, this is a so I can live with that,
And have you encountered like any of these groups in real life, or?
No, not at all. No, not at all. They say they'll come and get you, and they'll stab you, and they'll slice you up. But they never. I mean, it's not like I wouldn't mind. It's not like I'm hard to find. I mean, I whenever I do a gig anywhere, I advertise it quite publicly. If I'm doing when I do the Edinburgh Festival, I'm basically telling them that for 3 weeks on the trot, I will be at this address from this time, from the hours of 10:30 to midnight. I will be there at that room every day. At this place, and not one of them's ever not had a single person turn up. Not even just a random loony throw something at me. Nothing. I did have one guy threaten. To stab me on Twitter in come and find me in Edinburgh, and I found out this guy is actually an English Defence League, a former Scottish Defence League member who was jailed for threatening to stab his girlfriend, and he's sending me threats on Twitter.
Wow.
So I just linked him to a gig saying I'll be there. These are the I have this bizarre fascination, this fantasy of like being killed on stage. That it's like. It's like I know it sounds morbid as hell, but it's like whenever I have this whenever it says how would you prefer to die, it's like I want to be assassinated. Like it was always I just want to be randomly killed on on stage, taken out, and if no one actually was gonna, if I couldn't find anyone to actually organise my own, sort of I'd leave it that way, and then if anyone found out it was me, then that would just make the mystery even better, and.
Well, that'd be sure to increase your fan base.
Exactly, and also
who's this comedian?
Exactly, well, that's the great thing about once you're dead is if you die, particularly in a mysterious or a very sort of big way like that, like you're assassinated and you're not famous, you immediately all the stuff I've already done will become much more important and interesting than it actually is. People will read much more into it, and I'll be able to sort of achieve a level of fame without actually having to do any work because I'll be dead, which sort of appeals to my inherent laziness. So yeah, I'm all for that,
And so, being an atheist, how do you feel about letting children believe in things when they're little kids that don't necessarily exist, like Santa, leprechauns, or the Easter Bunny?
Well, the thing is, kids are going to believe in things that don't exist, whether you tell them that or not. I mean, I this whole thing. Anyone who thinks that I think it's a good thing actually to teach kids about things like that, as long as you teach them that it's all in your imagination. I mean, you can teach kids kids run around and talk to things that ain't there all the bloody time. As far as Father Christmas goes, I believed in Father Christmas. I'm pretty sure most people do to some extent. I think there's a lot more fuss made about it than the thing about Father Christmas is. Father Christmas is easy to disprove after a while. I mean, it's because Father Christmas is supposed to be someone who literally comes into your house at night and then puts presents under your and there comes a point as a kid when you're going to figure out that it's actually not Father Christmas doing that. And even then, there's going to come a point when you grow up and you've got to actually buy presents for people, and then you've got to get, So the idea that this is a damaging thing. I mean, kids are, people have this fear of things that are, because of this. One of the symptoms of this sort of militant movement atheism that I've found is there's this overbearing fetishization of being rational and logical and reasonable 150% of the time. And I'm like, no, there's some great things have come out of people who are just from being completely illogical and being completely irrational. I mean, from terms of also being logical isn't always a good thing. I mean, I could say that, you could say logically, okay, you want to eliminate, so if you want to end the Israel-Palestine conflict, let's just bomb and kill all the Palestinians. That will end, now that's logical, right? Isn't it? I mean, that's a logical conclusion. You just kill all the Palestinians. If you want to end, if you want to end racism, it's simple. Kick out all the black people. Yeah. There you go. There's there's a
logical.
Kind of
like how Walter White was logical to the extreme, where he had no morals. Breaking Bad.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, the thing that makes us human beings is our emotions, and our emotions are not reasonable, and our emotions are not rational, and that they can be sometimes. It's generally
that's
why
we have art and music and stuff like that.
Yeah. And also you look at some of the great sort of. I look at someone like Nikola Tesla, who invented. Who's responsible for some great sort of scientific innovations and inventions and discoveries. But the guy was a mentalist. I mean, on another level, he was absolutely insane. And even people like Isaac Newton, was a bit of a nutter in other aspects and that. And so there's this fear of it. And some of the great sort of art and the great sort of art that we're familiar with, music and things that we're familiar with, and films and books and poetry. And even stand-up. I mean, it comes from people who are not thinking, who were thinking outside the box and were thinking a little bit thinking a little bit sideways, and there's nothing wrong with using that as long as it's applied correctly. Then it's not a dangerous thing. It's not something that's going to be dangerous. Religion and belief in God is nothing more than a byproduct of our human. We've got this desire to know. We hate not knowing things, and then we hate. But then there are things that we can't possibly know, and then we have this desire to sort of like create. And human beings are imaginative creatures. We create things that aren't there. This is why we have things that we exist. We have things in our everyday life now that 200 years ago didn't exist and no one would have thought existed. It's because we imagine them and we decide to create them from that. And so because of that, if you're going to ask a question like, why are we here, or what happens when we die, which cannot be answered, and you can't know the answer, but you've got an imagination, you're going to fill it in. And so that's really all a lot of this comes from. Is like we fill in gaps with with what we imagine makes the most sense, even if it's not. There's no real basis for it. So, and that's really all it is. Whereas like a lot of other people, they'll use their imagination, they will create lots of other things, will create great masterpieces and things and bits and pieces. Whereas most people, if you're working 45, 50 hours a week, trying to get by paying the bills with your regular, with your family and your house and your mortgage, you ain't got time to sit around and fucking concoct, a great symphony, or learn how to play the sodding cello, or do a Turner seascape in watercolors. So you're probably gonna sit there and do it in other ways.
And here's another thing I always thought. It's like if it weren't religion that people were using to oppress people, I think it'd be something else. I think the problem is human nature to just be assholes to each other,
Well, there's a myth that goes about. People always talk about religion and war, saying, "Oh, religion is the cause of most wars," and actually, it's
greed
not.
And money,
religion is simply. It's generally it's land, it's resources, it's power. It's because people want stuff. It's because people want a piece of land. They want the resources that the British Empire was not based on. It was not based on anything other than there was no religious element to it. We just wanted everything. We went over to China and just took their opium because we wanted to. Well, you look at again. A lot of atheists don't like it when you bring this up, but you look at a lot of communistic, a lot of extreme communist regimes that were very anti-religious to the point where they were like wipe out religious people.
Well, kind of replace religion with another religion, political religion, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it's all just like religion is not something that existed without us. It exists because you can't. People say we want to get rid of religion. I'm like, well, okay, you're going to get rid of religion, but do you know how? First of all, how do you do that? And secondly, how do you just how do you stop it? It's really just religion, if nothing else. If you want to look at religion in the worst possible light, for me, I look at it as nothing more than a symptom of human of our of the things that are our human failings, and that it's just a byproduct of it.
Well, I think maybe like if the main problem is maybe how people interpret religion. Maybe there's too much of a literal interpretation when really I think maybe it could be applied to making the world a better place or just being better human in certain
yeah ways. I don't care. If someone does something good, I don't really care why they do it. I'm not really too bothered, but this was the problem I ended up having with a lot of the militant atheist groups online. Is they had this bizarre thing, like they would rage against religious people who were extremists, like these fundamentalist groups, and then you'd get these religious people who were much more moderate and much more modernized and civilized. And their immediate response is to go over them and say, you're not really like that. You've just picked and choosed all the bit. I'm like, why are you having a go at this person, right, for being a civilized human being? You're basically say, at least the fundamentalists, at least they're following their book a lot more. I'm like, well, bully for them, but they're nutters. I'd rather live in a world filled with intellectually dishonest hypocrites who believe in God and end up, and pick the nice stuff, and then the people who believe in God with an intellectual consistency and are raging psychopaths. I'm more of a consequentialist, I suppose, in the way I view things. Like if it makes things better, if it makes people better, then I'm all for it.
Or like, what was I thinking of? Like Confucianism, like has nothing to do with like a god really, but it's more like a philosophy on. I mean, it has its stupid parts, kind of misogynistic in a lot of ways. But that's. I mean, just. I guess I'm trying to say like I guess like there's a way like you can interpret them more as like philosophies and maybe like take what resonates out of it as a way to. Without necessarily believing.
Yeah, I mean, I always said with the Bible was always to me it was like the Johnny Cochran of books, because no matter what you believed or didn't believe, or what you supported or didn't support, you could find something in there that would back you up. You know, I mean, it's like a very good lawyer. You know, it's like whatever you want to believe, whatever you want. I mean, and there's this myth as well about people who are like people talking about the Westboro Baptist Church, and they'll say that, oh well, they're following their Bible a lot better than say a modern. But that's not true. They're just following the Old Testament a lot better, is what they're following. They're following all the nasty, horrible stuff a lot better. You know, they're not loving their fellow man, or turning the other cheek, or doing any of that other. Good stuff. They're just following. They're cherry picking just as much as anyone else. They cherry pick the horrible stuff.
Yeah. Well, like me, like I don't even really believe that Jesus ever existed. But like out of the whole Bible, I think like he at least like if you interpret it like a non-dogmatic sense, as far as just applying it to being a better person and bettering this world rather than heaven and an afterlife. I think he had some good things to say, even if he was just.
Well, I'm always surprised that Jesus is never picked up on or used by any anarchist groups as a sort of symbol of what they do. Because if you look at what Jesus did, in his day and age, he was an anarchist. I mean, he was all about taking down the state. He was about opposing the state. He was about helping the poor, helping the meek, helping those who were. That's what he was about. He was about destroying the establishment, and it's bizarre that he's become a symbol of the establishment, which is going against everything, most of the things he said. But I agree with you. I mean, as a character, I think there's a lot to be. If you look at Jesus' just story as a character, and if you imagine it just as a book. And the story, nothing else. You don't look into all the. You don't look at it. It's very interesting,
And and that's why it's weird that a lot of the Republicans and whatnot are like the Christian right say that they're super followers of Jesus, because he's kind of like everything he spoke against. Like I would think if you were truly a follower of Jesus, your ideas would be more socialistic.
Yeah. But again, this is just again, it's just these people seeing what they want to see. I mean, they'll just interpret it how they want it to. I mean, if people can talk about I remember Rush Limbaugh talking about Jesus and taxes. I'm like, if Jesus was around, he would tax you lot by 99%. In fact, he'd insist you give everything up. I mean, his whole thing was give up your possessions, give them away. And then go wandering with. I'm sure you'd have to, because you'd have no house to live in, so you'd have to go for a walk. But
So, how did you first come across Alex Jones, and what made you decide to make several parody videos?
First of all, you can't. It's impossible to make. Really, it's impossible to make parodies of Alex Jones, and even my parodies of Alex Jones were not really parodies. They were more sort of impressions just of Alex Jones, really, because it's virtually impossible to do that. I used to be a bit of a conspiracy nut. Many years ago, I stopped. I stopped getting into it. I sort of stopped buying into it a couple of months after I stopped taking cocaine. I don't know whether those two things are connected. There's probably a correlation. There is no doubt a correlation there. But I used to be that 9/11 was an inside job, and the moon landing and JFK, all those conspiracies. I was 9/11 was very interesting. It's fascinating in a way, but I was never as far to the extremes of Alex Jones, but I was sort of I was nearing that, but I suppose when it comes down to, I mean, the thing about conspiracy theories is they work on the same basis as religion, except the difference really is the fact that with conspiracy theories, it's there's a much cool, conspiracy theories are cool to sort of like there's an appeal to them, particularly if you're young and you're anti-establishment or you're trying to rage against the machine or whatever. You know, there's an appeal there to it because that ties in with that counterculture thing. The problem is it is based on the same load of horseshit that anything else is based. It's based on assumptions and misinformation and just twisting stuff to suit an agenda, and at the end of the day, it's all well and there's enough real. At the end of the day, you also realise eventually that conspiracy theories, you're actually helping the establishment by buying into them because
discrediting any real.
It's distracting people away as well. It's distracting people away from things they should really be getting.
Because the problem with Alex Jones is he goes to the extreme where like everything's a conspiracy, everything's planned.
But I mean, for me, with Alex Jones, I mean, the thing about Alex Jones is he's not anti-establishment at all. I mean, most of the stuff, most of the sources, when he uses an actual news source, if you will, it's things like the Daily Mail or Fox News. It's things like Breitbart.com. It's these incredibly establishment based news sources. But the whole thing about Alex Jones, I mean, Alex Jones is like, the thing I always wonder with him is like, what would the world, what in his mind would the world be? Because everything is like, from like every major news, like every terrorist attack, every war, all the elections, everything you see on the TV.
Thought, Sandy Hook was staged too.
Every major incident like that. Even the weather, even the fucking weather is faked by the. And I'm like, what would the world be like if they weren't doing that? Would we all just be sat around it and be like chirping like nothing, nobody doing anything? I just don't understand but like he manages to tie everything into absolutely anything. And whenever you watch one of his videos, he basically starts off on one. He'll find one issue, and like one of the videos I did to him recently, a couple of months ago, was he made a video saying that the word "girl" had been banned in the UK for being offensive, and I'm like, and it wasn't. It just wasn't. I can assure you.
It was just cut off from one segment of the BBC.
It was cut off from one segment of a BBC article. That was it, and none of the people involved really gave a shit. But then you listen to Alex Jones, and by the end of it, he's going on about how people are being arrested. There are spies in restaurants in Sheffield and London arresting people because they said the word Muslim. You can't have a taco party without being lynched. It's just.
And then there wasn't another thing he said. Like he's putting estrogen. They're putting estrogen in our water to make us gay, or something like putting something.
Yeah, he basically. That was one of the first ones I did. I think that was the one I did. This is the only thing I need to not take Alex Jones seriously is the fact that he claims that there are more gay people around now because of the stuff governments are putting in our food. And you just can't. And the thing that's worrying is, I mean, this guy's got people can laugh. I mean, he's a laughable figure, but he's got a 6-figure income. He's got a 6-figure annual income. His YouTube channel's got nearly 1 million subscribers. And, and when you look at some of the people who go on his show, a lot of people go on there to get sort of, I mean, like, politicians go on. I mean, Ron Paul used to go on there quite a lot. I mean, even blokes from UKIP, from the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage has been on the Alex Jones show, and so to dismiss him completely as just this raging big fat blob of mentalness would be easy, but it's wrong because he does have a much further reach than you would believe. So that's right. And also, he's just one of those people who's just, he's easy to do parodies of, and because so I do put them in. So I tend to just sort of like, I've thrown a couple of them. I did the song about him. The thing about the impression video I did of him was I did claim that 50% of the stuff I was saying was real stuff Alex Jones had said. and 50% of it was stuff I made up, and that was actually not true. It was like all of it was literally stuff Alex Jones had said.
Really?
I just did that because I wanted to see what Alex Jones fans would say about stuff that I was saying, whether they would sit there and because they always like, if you give them that little get out, then you can see that they'll try and claim that you just Alex Jones would never say that or that, this, that, or the other.
And so, what motivates you to keep making videos, and how long do you think you'll keep making?
As long as I've got a YouTube channel, and as long as I'm physically capable and mentally capable, I'll keep doing it. I mean, it's something I'm good at, and beyond being something I'm good at, it's something that I think I mean, everyone wants to sort of come and fight. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm not one of these. I'm not someone who's gonna change the fucking world. I'm not a Mandela or a Martin Luther King. But I want to sort of try and do as much. I think I can do something that's gonna try and just sort of make the world a better place in my own mind. I can justify what I've done in my life. I mean. I said I'm not someone who's not going to go. I'm not going to go off and invent something. I'm not going to find a cure for AIDS or cancer, and I'm not going to sort of be involved in the next spaceship mission to land on Mars. But what I can do is I can sort of use my experience and what I do in order to sort of promote a message or put forward an idea that may at the end of the day help someone deal with something or make someone laugh. Just make someone just for 15 minutes they might forget. That's really the thing about sort of comedy when you stand on stage is for 1 hour when people are laughing, nothing else suddenly matters anymore. Everything else they've remembered in their life, everything else they're supposed to be worrying about, like have I got to get that bill paid or am I got to get that report in or this is driving me mad or that's driving me, whatever it is, it goes away because when you're laughing and when you're enjoying yourself, it all disappears. And I'll always do it because I think at the end of the day, I think whilst you can't you can't quantify the level of good or the level of bad that you do in your life. You can't sort of put it into units and measure it. You can sort of go like, right, if there was a scale of like, every time I do something bad, it goes down, and every time I do something good, it goes up. Would I be in the positive? Would my life would my existence, has there been a net gain of good through my existence? And I suppose at this moment, I'd probably say yes. I'd probably say don't know how high up it would be, but it's like, there's enough examples and there's enough people who I think will remember me and what I've done will be remembered by enough people for maybe only a couple of years after I'm dead. But by the time I'm dead and gone, that's not going to matter to me. But as long as I've got the ability to, I'm going to carry on because I mean, apart from anything else, I can't do much else with my life. I'm not very good at much else. So I will always carry on doing stuff like that as long as I've got the means to do so.
And what can you say about your podcast, The Left Wing Propaganda Machine, and what was the motivation behind that?
It was just a way of doing something else, really. I mean, it was just another me having a go at something else. I'd tried podcasts before and never really found an idea that stuck. And then just decided, I thought, right, well, if I just stick to something simple, I'll just go through the news and find enough news stories. And if I can fill up a 40-minute, like 30 to 45-minute podcast with it every couple of weeks, that'll be it. I mean, it's just another means of me. It's just another outlet. It's another way for me to sort of put everything out there. Because sometimes one thing that tends to happen when it is like I'll find something. I'm like, oh, that's good. I'd like to talk about that, but it's not really worth a video. It's not a video. There's not a video's worth. So if I just take all these little bits and pieces and put them into something. And then I put them all together at the end of a week or so. And it's like, right, I can talk about all this stuff. And it's just another way for me to find another outlet for me to sort of put myself and put my ideas out there and to carry on doing. And also, eventually from that, a lot of stuff, something else can stem from that. There's a lot of stuff I've done. There's a lot of stand-up material I've done that stemmed from something that happened online. So that's it really. I mean, I just came. This seems to work. This format. So I'll be giving that. I did do a thing a couple of years ago. I did a thing called the Dix O'Clock News, that ran for like, I think it was 3 months. I ran it once a week for 3 months, and it was very popular, but I ended up not having the time to do it anymore. So I always wanted to bring that back, so I figured doing it as a podcast, that's a 45-minute podcast, where I basically just take random news stories and just put my 2 cents in on it, or just report on, report those on it in my own little way. Then something may come of that, something may not. But I mean, I'm doing it just because it's there, and it seems to be working.
And what can you say about the music you've recorded on the side, and when did you first develop a passion for music?
I've never really had a passion for music as such. I mean, when I was younger, I learnt to play the guitar, and that was it really. I never really went into the idea of getting into a band. I haven't got much of a voice for it, and nothing I ever wrote was groundbreaking enough. But I mean, the music. I mean, I actually put it together. I've only done, in terms of YouTube, when you look at the songs I've done on YouTube, I've only done about 12 songs. They tend to have been quite popular ones. Obviously, the most popular one being the Nazis Without Aptitude, the original song there. That was the most popular one, and the subsequent 2 ones from that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not songs are not something that I sort of tend to set out to do. It's like, generally, if I've got an idea and I'm like, right, how can I put this across? I'll try certain things before I get to it, and a song generally I can't write a song about something until I know it well enough that it sort of just rolls off quite easily. Because when you look at the things I've done songs about, they're things that I talk about virtually most of the time. I've done 2 Alex Jones songs. I've done a song about the English Defence League. I did a song about David Duke, the KKK leader and stuff. Well, it was when he was running for president. He was going to run for president, so I did a presidential campaign song for him, and just little things like that. Yeah. So yeah, I don't really have a passion for it as such. I've got a ukulele as well, which I've been playing occasionally, which I muck around with, but I'm not brilliant at it, and it's just occasionally I think of something. I've actually been working the next song I'm going to be doing on. I'll give you an exclusive on this one. So I'm working on a cover of Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys,
nice.
but it's called Islamophobic,
okay.
and by the Beastie Boys. And I just had this idea ages ago. Generally, it starts with one simple idea that pops in your head, then the rest of the song stems from it. And it was just this idea. I had that tune in my head, and I just started sort of humming, going, Islamophobic, scary Muslims scare me, Islamophobic. And I just had that with it. I thought, right, there's got to be something in there. So I'm sure that'll be out at some point or another. But that'll be the next one I'm working on.
So, any final thoughts or things you'd like to say?
No, not really, mate. I mean, it's always fun to sit around and reminisce about everything and talk about everything. I mean, I will say this to anyone: if anyone out there is looking to get into, particularly with the YouTube stuff, I mean, all I'll say to you is just come on here realizing one thing, that you are your own. You're your own. On the internet, all people are created equal. And it doesn't matter how many subscribers or followers or Facebook pages someone's got, that doesn't make them that does not make anyone on here your superior. And no one is your true superior. So when you come on here, be your own person, and don't let anyone else, don't try and let anyone else sort of like tell you what you can and cannot say. Don't let anyone else push you around or try and influence you. Just, do what you want to do, and do it because you want to do it, and do it right,
All right. Well, that does it for this episode of BSing with Sean K. Dick, it was great to have you on.
Thank you very much.
And, I should have more interviews coming soon. Stay tuned.